Welcome to an ACT Chess Association broadcast of the events that are currently being run online on chess.com, while the ACT chess clubs here in Canberra, Australia are still in lockdown. As I said in my last summary, there is some good news. The Tuggeranong Chess Club, which meets at the Vikings Club in Erindale, it looks like they're going back this coming Monday for face-to-face play. The only restrictions on that are it's maximum of 20 players, and preference will be given to regular club members of that club. Still making inquiries on behalf of the Gungahlin Chess Club. So when we can go back at the Eastlake Club in Gungahlin, still waiting on a response on that one, but hopefully I'll be able to keep you posted either through this stream or via email. My name is Sean Press. I organise these events on behalf of the ACT Chess Association. Thursday night, which is yesterday evening, is the night where we hold our standard tournament. Now, this is a 45-minute plus 15-second time limit event, played one round a week over 6 weeks. This is the fourth one that we've organised. These actually have worked quite well and have become very popular with players who don't get their regular chess and find that online chess is either a mixture of bullet and blitz and just really isn't to their liking. So what we're trying to do here is do our best giving them longer time controls to play. Now, I know a few people eyebrows go up when they hear that and go, well, what's to stop someone using an engine, especially with all that extra time? And the short answer, to be honest, is nothing, except the player's own personal ethical standards, for one way of putting it. And I really haven't had many difficulties in this regard. There have been a couple of games where the eyebrows have gone up and discussions have been had, but nonetheless, we're not rife with people trying to cheat the system. And that's really good, and I think that reflects really well on Canberra chess players, by the way. So last night was our standard event. There are 19 players in this tournament. The game I'm featuring is a top-of-the-table clash between Sulia Vancible and Graham Saint. Sulia plays out of Melbourne, but she was formerly a Canberra junior. She's done pretty well in a lot of these tournaments. Graham Saint has done a little bit better. I think he won the second edition of this event we had. So these clashes are always quite interesting. Sulia has a very direct attacking style, and it works really well in this game. So I'm just going to get straight into it now. Starting with E4 as our first move. Clicked the wrong button. E4, C5, C3. As I've said in a couple of broadcasts, C3 Sicilians are becoming a very popular club level method, and of course Grandmaster level method. David Smurden, who has a long time played this, drew with Magnus Carlsen in the 2016 Chess Olympiad with C3, so it's not a bad choice. Queen A5 was a surprise though, and clearly the idea is simply just to pin the C pawn, because after D4 takes, you can't take back with the C pawn because it'd be check. And after queen takes d4, you develop with knight c6 here, and you start kicking the queen around. On the other hand, the queen sitting on a5 really doesn't do that much apart from preventing d4. So whether you think it's worth it, I'm not 100% sure. Whether just developing the rest of your pieces is better is a matter of personal taste. It's not a bad move, by the way. It's just unusual. So knight f3, knight c6, and d4 gets played anyway. Knight a3 is another choice in this position, just exploiting the fact that the queen's on a bad iffy square, following it up with knight e4, c4, sorry, kidding the queen. But d4 was played, c takes, and of course we can't take with the pawn. Knight takes d4 is what was played. If you want to play it like a gambit, bishop d3 can be played here, because after d takes c3, knight takes c3, you get Smith-Morra type position with a couple of differences. One, the bishop on d3 normally lives on c4, and the queen obviously isn't out on a5 this early in the game. Even though white's down a pawn in this position, the lead in development and the fact the queen probably isn't on its best square makes the position at least equal. So knight takes d4, and e5 was played. This gives white a chance to play quite a good move. So much so that knight takes d4 is probably recommended here. Queen takes, and now play e5 here and push the queen back a little bit to this square here. And there's a couple of pluses and minuses again for both sides. Black, I think, should be reasonably happy with this position. The knight to f6 is fine. The bishops can come out at some point. The only drawbacks for black are that at the moment d5 is hard to achieve in this position. But on the other hand, also with the pawn on c3, which its main job was to capture towards d4, is now blocking the knight on b1 from developing. But e5 was played instead straight away without the swap of the knights. And white missed knight b5 here, with the idea of landing on d6 with check. And black's choices are either to move the king, which you probably don't want to do because you'd like to castle, or capture on d6 with the bishop and give up the two bishops and still end up with a problem with developing your bishop on c8 because the pawn on d7 is kind of stuck for the moment. I've had a vote for move 3, knight a3, of course, instead of move 4. Thank you, Attenbois, for way back here. The suggestion was knight a3 in this position. But anyway, knight b5. And just to show you, if you play a6 to kick the knight, that doesn't matter for white because white will just play knight d6, bishop takes, queen takes, knight. f6 to attack the pawn, and something like f3 is fine. And yeah, white, even though white is behind in development, this position turns out to be good. The similar setup to this is the Lowenthal variation of the Sicilian, with an early e5 and the knight going in on d6. The only differences there is one is the queen is normally not on a5 at this point, and secondly, the pawn isn't on c3. After knight b5, queen d8 is your other choice, and then knight a3, which was suggested elsewhere in a different position. Knight f6 and knight c4 is good for white, and the d6 square is just falling into white's hands here. But knight takes c6 was played, b takes c6 is obvious, and now actually black doesn't have any problems with playing d5 here because the pawn on c6. So weirdly, white started with c3 to try and capture back after d4, but it's black that's going to get this one in if black plays the position correctly. Knight d2, let's develop some pieces. Knight to f6, bishop to d3 to protect, bishop to e7. Let's get our king into safety by castling, and now knight c4. So the knight went to d2 and then to c4, kicks the queen, so the queen needs to go somewhere. Obviously the pawn is under attack as well, so queen c7 seems to be the safest square for it. Queen e2 and rook b8 have been suggested here, putting the rook on the open file. f4 was played, and I'm giving this an exclamation mark, question mark move, because it fits in with Soulia's direct attacking style. Having said that, the engine went wine, this isn't a great move. And in fact, white had a lot better. But sometimes the objectively best moves don't suit the way you play chess, and you've just sometimes got to play moves like this because it fits in with how you will win your game, and in this case with some sort of kingside attack, which does happen in this game, by the way. Sure, it depends on your opponent not necessarily defending 100% accurately, but opponents tend not to defend 100% accurately. So f4, d5 though is a good move. And it's the right counter in the center. Okay, and it gets a little bit complicated around here. There are lots of captures going in lots of directions, leaving pieces hanging. Do I take pawns? Do I take pieces? And let's just see a couple of them coming up. But knight takes e5, for example. Bishop check. Okay, king in the corner. D takes e4, hitting the bishop. Bishop to c4. Bishop b7. Queen e1, and bishop to d6 is a slightly quieter line than what happened and favours black, because basically black's got sort of more active pieces in this case. There's a couple of things that you've got to watch for here. One is just capturing on e5, winning a pawn. Two, the long diagonal, even though there are two pawns currently here. If you can move these pawns with tempo, this bishop can become quite strong. And the knight on f6 has a few squares to go to, especially after an exchange on e5. So white played f takes e5 instead. And after d takes, of course, you take on f6. Okay. And weirdly enough, black's next move was a bit of a mistake. And it astonishes me that this is considered a mistake, even though it is. And it's one of the reasons why chess is a hard game to play sometimes. Bishop c5. It saves the bishop from getting captured, and it's a check at the same time, and it turns out to be wrong. And that's just somewhat weird and really frustrating if you're trying to play your best chess. Instead, instead of bishop c5, rook d8 was an interesting idea, because after f takes, queen takes, and the pin along the d file stops the bishop from moving. And after bishop e3, you take on d3 here, queen goes to f3 to protect the e-pawn, and then bishop a6, and black is slightly better in this position. Pawns are equal. You might think that the d3 pawn is super strong. It's not quite super strong. If it could be like supported, say with the queen charging up here, it'd become strong, but at the moment it's a target. And black is going to have to defend it, and white is going to try and win it. And that sort of maps out what's going to happen. Having said that, because of opposite coloured bishops, it's quite hard to win because the bishop on a6 is doing a pretty good job defending it, and there is no white bishop that moves on the white squares that can possibly challenge it. But, as I said, bishop c5. What could be wrong with this? King to h1. Now we take the bishop. And it turns out that queen h5 is the reason why bishop c5 was wrong. Because the queen gets to h5 with tempo. One, it wants to start attacking the king, but two, because the bishop is undefended on c5, the queen is also threatening this. And this gives white some crucial moves and extra time to build up the attack. For example, if you went to save the bishop, hey, I'm a bishop up, this is great, you get mated straight away with queen g5, threatening mate on g7, g6, and you just play queen h6, and mate on g7 can't be stopped. So that's why queen h5 is strong. You can't retreat the bishop or save the bishop because queen g5. So you have to deal with queen g5. And it turned out that rook e8 was the right move here, because after queen takes c5, we're going to pick up the bishop. Queen e5 is the move. And now you're threatening to exchange queens. Raggedy pawns in every direction. The pawn on f6, the pawn on e4, the pawn on d3, pawn on c6 even, are all ripe for picking, and it's a complicated position, but it's probably an equal position. Just note, after rook e8, if you try queen g5 thinking you're going to get an easy mate, bishop f8 puts an end to that dream for you, unfortunately, and black is a piece up and hangs on. So, rook d8 was played instead, queen to c5, and black had a plan here, and again, I feel sorry for black for most of this game, to be honest, because black had obvious plans that looked like they were going to work, and they just kept not quite working. d2, again, what could be stronger than this? I am simply threatening to make another queen or take the bishop and make another queen. But mate comes before material, and queen g5. And suddenly queen g7 is being threatened, and if you play g6 again, queen h6, and the game's all over. So faced with this, black has to start running and play king f8. Now, there's a nice sequence of moves here. I mean, white played bishop takes d2, nothing wrong with that. Perfectly good move. The fun line is queen takes g7. King to e8, queen to g8, king has to go to d7. You take on f7 with check. Again, the king has to go to d6. And then you play e5. Check. And the idea, of course, is that when the king moves away, pick a square, any square. I'm going to pick c5 in this case. You can get away with queen takes c7 here. Hang on. Can't I just make a queen? And then if rook takes queen, rook takes rook, back rank checkmate. Don't laugh. Juniors fall for this trick all the time. I've seen so many games just come undone like this. Take a deep breath. Look at all checks and captures. Bishop e3. Check. And suddenly the two rooks are working together, and that queen's going to come off the board. So that's a line that white could have easily played. Note that even with the time limit of 45 minutes plus 15 seconds a move, I was looking at the clock times for this game, and there was a shortage of time even at this point. Okay, so bishop takes d2. Nothing wrong with that. G takes f6. Again, queen takes f6. Runs into the following winning line. If you play rook takes d2, queen h8 check, king to e7, rook takes f7 check. So these major piece combinations, by the way, are fun to look at. They're often hard to spot during the game, but are worth practicing. One of Yusupov's excellent coaching manual books, Build Up Your Chess and Boost Your Chess, has a couple of chapters to do with major piece combinations like this, and they're worth studying, because often kingside attacks aren't just about minor pieces and the queen hacking on h7. They're often about bringing the king out in the open and then mating the king in the middle of the board. King takes f7, queen takes h7 check, king e6, and we've won the queen on c7. And white is easily winning in this position. So g takes, but rook takes f6, okay. White has a massive advantage, by the way, here. nothing really to stress about. There's not a lot that white can do to ruin this, I'm going to say at this point, but it's still worth looking at how white efficiently or semi-efficiently finished the game off. If you play rook takes d2 here, of course, the queen is defending backwards, so don't do that. Bishop e6 instead. We'll play bishop e3, rook a to b8. Okay, white could actually now again go for another major piece combination with rook takes e6, because after f takes e6, we bring the other rook into the game. King to e8, queen to h5 check, king to d7, rook f7 check, king c8, rook takes wins queen. Okay, and again, white should be winning this. The only thing that white really doesn't want to walk into is a back rank checkmate with rook d1. At the moment, the queen is guarding it, so it's not a problem, but h3 is going to be a move that needs to be played. Okay, rook a b8, rook a f1, similar idea. I'm just threatening to take on e6 now, and the pawn is pinned. So the rook goes to b5 to hit the queen, queen to h6, king to g8. Again, another major piece combination starting with rook takes e6, f takes, queen takes, king h8, bishop d4. And mate is going to happen pretty shortly. Rook f3 was a nice move when I was looking at the game. The idea is simply to play rook g3 and then queen g7. So queen went to c8 because after rook g3, now bishop g4 works. Queen f6, good move. And again, when I first saw it, I went, oh, why is that so? I was looking at things like just queen g, oh no, not queen check. I was looking at lines with bishop to d4, for example. Queen to d7, okay, and now bishop h6 is one way of winning. Rook takes g4 is another way of winning. So rook takes g4 check, queen takes g4, queen takes d8. Very nice move here. King g7, and again I kept when I was looking at this game, bishop d4, but queen f6 is much stronger because this just leads to mate in a few. With king to g8, queen takes f7, king into the corner, and then bishop d4 check is probably simple, because if you then block with the queen on g7, queen f, I'll just show you the line anyway. We go check, here, check, here, bishop check, here, take on g7 if you want to, or be a smarty pants with queen f8, and that's also mate. So that was a win for Sully Avancible over Graham Saint in last night's ACT Standard event. A couple of things here. F4, as much as objectively it's not a great move, suits your style, play it, I think. F for forward, H for hack, as they say. But queen h5 was a really nice find, I think. That really got the whole attack going. And it comes back to one of the premises of chess, which is mate over material. So king safety should always be your first priority. Then winning material should be your second priority in most cases. So after that round, Sully actually leads that tournament on 3 out of 3. There's a tie for second between Victor Bragan and Lachlan Ho, who played and drew their game last night. And Matt Radicic, who also won his game. A little bit fortunate for Matt. Had to repair one of the games. He got a slightly lower rated opponent than he would normally have expected. So they're all on 2.5 out of 3. Next week will be round 4. Sully will take a pick out of one of those players, I'm assuming, once the pairings are done. And the other two are likely to be playing each other. My name's Sean Press. I run these events on behalf of the ACT Chess Association. I do the summaries here on Twitch and now going across to YouTube, as in I will archive these broadcasts on YouTube, do them the day after the tournament. So we run them in the evenings, around about 10 o'clock the next day. I'll be here on Twitch covering these events. So thanks for watching, and until next time, I will be seeing you later.